Hello and welcome back to the Boy Party 25 for 25, where I count down the 25 best films of the century so far. We've finally reached the top 10. These are the 10 essential films of the century, in my opinion. We're talking about perfect movies here. Films that reflect the filmmakers that I feel have really triumphed this century, the films of theirs that have meant the most to me. And for number 10, we're discussing Damien Chazelle's Whiplash. This is one of the toughest choices on the list for me in terms of a director who has two extremely strong contenders for the 25 for 25. I set myself this rule, one film per director. If that rule was not in place, there would absolutely be multiple Chazelle films on my list. I feel so strongly that both Whiplash and La La Land are essential, important films of the century. But having forced myself to make a choice, a real difficult choice between this tightly wound, perfect feature debut, well, not actually debut, second feature, but it feels like a debut in terms of how it, announced Chazelle on the world stage. Obviously, Guy and Madeline on a Park Bench does come before this, very low budget film, but and then the absolute just success story that everyone knows of La La Land, which is a film that kind of swept the hearts of the world 3 years after this film, and obviously had its big Oscar moment, as compromised as that ultimately was, and sort of set Chazelle up for a disappointing follow-up with First Man, and then, in my opinion, a pretty good bounce back with Babylon, which is a flawed film compared to Whiplash and La La Land, but an important film, a film with a lot of brilliant stuff in it, and a lot of the same DNA that makes his two standout features so special is still there in Babylon, even if it doesn't quite hit the level of perfection that especially Whiplash does. Whiplash is a film that I think reignited my love of cinema in a way. When I was, what age would I have been? This is the start of 2015, so I'm 17 years old here. And I remember hearing great buzz about this movie. I was at a point in my adolescence where I was very engaged in mainstream kind of blockbuster comic book cinema. I wasn't really watching a lot of independent stuff, a lot of awardsy stuff, films for grown-ups, you might say, like, coming up to the end of 2014, the movies I'm thinking about: Interstellar, the Planet of the Apes movies, The Hobbit, Star Wars, Marvel, DC. And then I hear Whiplash. This movie's meant to be great. And I go, okay, what is this? And I remember watching it after school on a Monday night, right around, it would have been a 1 year anniversary of when the film premiered at Sundance. We're talking January 2015, as the sort of Oscar nominations are about to come out. And oh my God, I didn't normally watch movies on Monday nights after school, and I found it extraordinary. I think I watched about 2/3 of it on the Monday night and then came back and finished it on the Tuesday night, because I only had about an hour of sort of TV time in my evenings at that point. And went into school on the Tuesday morning talking to my friends. Oh my God, guys, this film I started watching last night, Whiplash. Very unusual at this point that there would have been movies that that my friends in school wouldn't have heard of, that I would come in raving about, because as I said, everything I was talking about was really mainstream. It blew my mind. I had no idea. And I was like, grew up in a house where lots of great films were being shown, and I'd seen lots of great classic films, obviously, like dozens, but Whiplash as a new release, as a contemporary film that was arriving from a new, young, fresh filmmaker, really blew my mind. I mean, I didn't really know there was stuff like this being made in the American independent film world. I didn't know someone like Damien Chazelle was working. Like, Chazelle he's 12 years older than me. He's 40 now. So, when Whiplash came out, we're talking, 11, 12 years ago. So he's just slightly older than the age I am now. When I was 17, I didn't know you could do this. And I was familiar with both these actors a little bit. I knew Teller from Divergent. I knew Simmons from Spider-Man. The idea of like constructing your film around actors who weren't major movie stars was also something that I was really struck by. I don't know. I just feel like Whiplash kind of like opened up my horizons in a number of ways that were permanent from that moment on. And in 2014, 2015 is the time at which I started to engage with like real cinema in a certain way. So this film is super, super important to me and my relationship with film as a teenager. And I was rooting for it at the Oscars that year, although I also had a stake in Boyhood, which is, wink, wink, maybe going to make an appearance on this list. But it very quickly became one of my favorite films. And I couldn't stop raving about it. I got all my friends to go. They all loved it too. It became a big facet of our sort of social interactions for the next year or two, was talking about Whiplash, quoting Whiplash, making references to the characters, the performances, the script, the general vibe of this world that it sets up, of this music school and these stressful rehearsals and lessons and the toll it takes on Teller's character. I mean, it's just a film that I think everyone who's seen it becomes instantly iconic in their minds. It's so quotable. It's so referenceable. It's got a certain kind of muscular nature, but doesn't feel like a macho film. I think that's what's so special about it as well. It's about the sport of music, the toll of commitment to a craft. And I think that's universal across men and women and all ages. And I think the fact that it's a movie with very little in the way of femininity depicted on screen doesn't necessarily make it a imbalanced masculine film. At least that's my perspective on it. Like, this movie doesn't have a lot of dialogue from women, right? That's objectively true. There is the Melissa Benoist character. There is the lawyer at the end. There's peripheral female roles. But it's a movie about the relationship between two men and the power dynamics between men that can operate in an artistic environment and be productive and be harmful and everything in between. And I think that that it is shockingly universal. I think that Chazelle is actually quite a good filmmaker at making his films feel very, very three-dimensional and not just, oh, this film was made by a guy in his 30s. I don't know. I think La La Land is a film that women have obviously in my life have had mixed feelings on, but I do think that film has quite a good feminine perspective on seeking stardom in Hollywood. And then I think that Babylon has a lot of female perspective. But again, I'm a man saying these things, so don't take my word for it. Whiplash obviously begins with Miles Teller's character, Andrew Naiman, and he is in a very, very prestigious music school in New York, and he wants to be the best. He wants to be the greatest drummer in the world, the greatest jazz drummer. He's rehearsing. He can't get to the level of perfection that he wants.
What's your name?
Andrew Naiman, sir.
What year are you?
I'm first year.
But he gets sort of mentored by Terrence Fletcher, who is played by J.K. Simmons in what is obviously a role that sort of takes J.K. Simmons from being a reliable character actor who pops up in things. He's obviously in a couple of Coen Brothers movies. He's very good in Burn After Reading. He's in lots of stuff. And it jumps him up with an Oscar win and everything else to suddenly a guy that everyone knows his name. He's a beloved face in the film world now. And Andrew quickly realizes that Terrence Fletcher is a pretty nasty guy and he has pretty aggressive tactics to get excellence out of his students. He screams and roars, he makes homophobic insults, he throws things at you, and this is all him, as far as Fletcher sees it, aiming for excellence, aiming for perfection, and accepting nothing less. And I think this movie never quite comes to takes a side in terms of whether what he's doing is entirely justified. I think it leaves it up to the audience to figure out whether the balance of perfection versus cruelty is right or wrong, or whether Naiman ultimately decides that Fletcher is correct, because this movie ultimately does end with the two men looking at each other in its final moments with great admiration. But it sort of goes through every possible level of that power dynamic and asks you, the viewer, to decide whether this is helpful or harmful and where that balance sits. And that's something that me as a 17-year-old found incredibly refreshing in a film, to not be sort of having the message of the film told to me, but sort of offered up to me to make my own mind up. So I think it's just fantastic. But the elements of Naiman's life that kind of are shown peripherally outside of his lessons with Fletcher are also fantastic. You have this romance that briefly blossoms with a girl who works at a cinema, played by Melissa Benoist, who I really, really like.
Out.
I would love to take you out.
Where do you want to go?
Pizza.
Pizza.
Yeah.
Melissa Benoist hasn't had the best career outside of this movie, I would say. Like, she was on Glee, she played Supergirl for a number of years. She's been on stuff like the Girls on the Bus, and there was a show recently called The Waterfront. I think she's a great actress. I think she's got a wonderful, warm manner and face about her. And certainly when I was 17, I saw her in this movie and like fell in love with her. I think that this is a really good performance. I think that she's only in 3 scenes and she manages to really like give you a lot of a sense of like, this is a lovely, lovely person. And she is looking for the good in Andrew, and he ultimately rejects her in favor of his commitment to rehearsing his drumming. And it's really sad, and you feel really bad for her because she deserves so much better. And she communicates that in very few scenes. You have the great Paul Reiser as Andrew's father, which is just a wonderful performance as well. He's playing this like such a peripheral father by definition, but he's so invested in his son's happiness and success, but like also kept at a distance by Andrew because he doesn't really understand the commitment to the drumming. And he's ultimately like the most helpful presence in Andrew's life to keep him human, and it's great. Those are kind of the only main 4 roles in this film. There's guys in the band who are kind of, at war with Andrew for attention and for opportunity, and those roles are all very well cast, but they don't make quite as much of an impact.
What are you looking at? Look up here, look at me. Do you think you're out of tune?
Yes.
Then why the fuck didn't you say so?
The movie largely involves these kind of scenes of Andrew and Terrence in rehearsal rooms, getting the tension turned up to 11 and then creating a moment of musical brilliance. And it's such a well-edited film. It's such a well-shot film. The music in it is obviously incredible. You have Justin Hurwitz, who is Chazelle's great composing partner. He is working with obviously famous existing jazz music in this, but it's really incredible in terms of how this film stops and starts and keeps moving and never grinds to a halt for any reason and just keeps you hooked the entire time. And Tom Cross is the editor there, and he deserves a lot of credit for that. This is there's a great scene in the middle of the film where Andrew is at a family dinner with his cousins and his uncle, and his cousins are obviously like football players, and this is where the fact that this is a sports movie becomes the most obvious, which is that they don't understand that the drumming is a sport to Andrew as much as it is an art form, and that it requires a level of commitment and rehearsal that they would see as perfectly valid for football, but they don't understand with the musician. And Andrew's response to this is very amusing.
Travis and Dustin, they have plenty of friends and plenty of purpose.
I'm sure they'll make great school board presidents someday.
Oh, that's what this is all about? You think you're better than us?
Catch on quick, and model you in.
I got a reply for you, Andrew. You think Carlton football's a joke? Come play with us.
4 words you will never hear.
The big sort of action-packed third act scene, I guess, is when Andrew is performing at this very prestigious event, and he forgets his drumsticks and forgets his music, and it's just a whole thing, and he basically has to race back again. He ends up in a minor car crash, and it's extremely thrilling. It comes out of nowhere. It's really, really shocking, and like the level of violence this film gets to as Andrew tries to impress Fletcher is something you don't see coming, and is part of, I think, why it leaves such a mark on the audience.
Where the fuck are you, man? Call time was 5.
I know. I'm almost there. I'm right there.
We're on stage at 20.
I know we're on stage at 20.
And Fletcher's got Connolly warming up.
God
on stage.
fucking damn. Okay, you just tell that little...
At the end of the film, there is sort of a recognition of what Fletcher has done. He loses his job, and there is an opportunity for Andrew to press charges against him. There's also another student who has previously committed suicide after dealing with Fletcher's horrible treatment. So it's very obvious that this man's behavior is having a really, really dark and nasty impact on many of his students.
Why would you do this to me?
Do you think that I would let him put my son through hell and then just walk away scot-free? Don't you know I would never let that happen? That there is nothing in the world more important
But
to me
but Andrew turns down the opportunity to press charges. He seems to want to go about things his own way. He goes and he finds Fletcher performing at a bar and tries to reconnect with him. He ends up filling in at his at a thing that he's conducting, and then this leads to this great big final scene where he catches Fletcher by surprise. pisses him off, but then ultimately earns his respect. And as I mentioned, the film ends with these close-ups of their faces, and these guys have a lot of admiration for each other. And whether this is Andrew having lost his mind and turned into another version of Fletcher, or whether this is Andrew realizing that Fletcher's methods are the only way to achieve excellence, well, that's up to us to decide. And that's where the movie ends. I just find this film so rewatchable. I don't know anybody who doesn't love it. I think it's incredibly exciting, visceral, just cerebral movie, and Chazelle has yet to top it, although La La Land comes pretty close. As I said, this film did really, really well at the Oscars, considering its sort of budget and size and scale. It was nominated for Best Picture. This is the year that Birdman wins. Boyhood's obviously in the mix as well. American Sniper, Grand Budapest Hotel is also nominated for Best Supporting Actor. Wins Best Supporting Actor for Simmons, is nominated for Adapted Screenplay, and then wins Sound Mixing and Film Editing. The great disgrace of this film's Oscar successes, and I think this is very obvious to everyone, is that Miles Teller isn't nominated. What are they doing? I mean, this is just absurd. This is the absolute cornerstone of why this movie works is Miles Teller's performance. I know J.K. Simmons is bigger and louder and older, and he gets to do all the shouting and the throwing. But Miles Teller is so locked in, and he's such an engaging leading man in this film, as he is in most things. I think he's a wonderful actor. And it's such a disgrace that this movie, which is nominated for Best Picture, does not get a Best Actor nomination. The Best Actor nominees this year are all messed up. No nomination for him. No nomination for Ralph Fiennes in the Grand Budapest Hotel. No nomination for Ben Affleck in Gone Girl. It's ridiculous. They give the Oscar to Eddie Redmayne, which is just a joke. But anyway, this movie's legacy will outlast The Theory of Everything and all those other films. So it really is quite special. So Damien Chazelle, very exciting. I hope he brings lots more. He also did a Netflix show called The Eddie, I should mention, which was all right. But I hope he makes this prison movie with Daniel Craig and Cillian Murphy. I think it would be fantastic if he did. I can't wait to see what he does next regardless. He is really a fantastic filmmaker with such a fresh perspective, but also such influence of classic film and classic music and things that he admires and loves. And it's such a nice combination. Whiplash is the number 10 film on my 25 for 25. You can tune back in soon for more episodes of this series. You can find regular episodes of Boy Party every Tuesday on our feed at boypartypod.com. Thank you for tuning in. Goodbye.